Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company and the Roadster podcast.
That's right. Good
We have so many
morning.
of them, I get them confused at times, right? I'm Pete Gruber,
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome.
and we have some interesting news items for you this morning, mostly Roadster related. And if you don't have a Roadster, it's fine to join our podcast. If you're interested in buying one, go to our website. We've got lots of them there for sale. And we can certainly answer any questions. If you have any, let us know where you're coming in from. And the image behind us here. We always post most recently AI images. And this one is a prompt that I asked for a bright yellow 2008 Tesla Roadster in a field of wildflowers with mountain peaks and snow behind, and I didn't even tell it to put a lake in there. It did that all by itself. So anyway, for those of you that are Roadster knowledgeable, it's always fun to look for the inconsistencies in the image. And if any of you want to chime in, we immediately saw 3-4 items.
Yeah, I think we saw 4 of them right away. And I'm not going to say what any of them are at this point, but have people chime in. At first glance, though, it looks very much like a Roadster. It reminds me a lot of where you're going to be going to Europe.
Mm-hmm. Yep, very true. So the first thing that we have is a roll bar cover that's on Roadsters, and that Roadster behind us there doesn't have one. That's probably the first inconsistency in the picture. This one is a true convertible without any kind of a backing or a roll bar, but normal Roadsters, and if we can throw up an image here, guys, it is in the roll bar cover photo, and image number 2 is probably going to be the best one to start with. All the Tesla Roadsters, by the way, have some carbon fiber, and this is the only place that you find carbon fiber on every single Roadster. Mm-hmm. If it's optional carbon fiber, you may see hood vanes that are carbon fiber. You may see side scoops that are carbon fiber, door sills, and some carbon fiber pieces on the interior, trim pieces, the waterfall, the din template, the steering wheel housing, and all of this, of course, cost extra back in the day.
Sure.
But every single Roadster will have a carbon fiber roll bar cover, and because they are constantly exposed, if you're using your soft top, they take a beating, and the original resin that Tesla used and clear coat was not as advanced as some of the newer coatings now, which are UV resistant. So with age, these tend to get pretty weathered. Yellowing is quite common, and this particular one actually has some body damage. If we can go to the next image now, guys, it's image number, let's see here. It's under Final Edit, image number 4. That's a good clean background. We repair these, is where I'm going with all of this. And our body team is very good about restoring carbon fiber pieces. And it's kind of an art because you can't sand everything off. And if you get too far into it, you start damaging the weave. There's a carbon fiber cloth underneath carbon fiber. So it takes a very experienced, delicate touch to be able to remove the old material and then apply new UV-resistant resin and clear coat. And here you can see an example of a restored carbon fiber piece that covers up the roll bar. We also, by the way, have carbon fiber pieces for Roadsters beyond just this cover. Sometimes the hood vanes, for example, get cloudy. That's another common problem on Roadsters. Or if you have PPF on parts like that, that can become cloudy or yellow. So once your Roadster comes to our shop, we're able to do a full assessment on it and let you know what our recommendations are regarding what you might want to improve on that car.
Yeah, the guys in the back there that work on that paint and body are absolute magicians.
Mm-hmm.
They're so good at what they do there, and it's been fun to see the kind of work that they're able to do.
Looks like we have a question from YouTube, Highlander Apparel, yes.
Hmm.
He says, what about other EV batteries? He's considering a Rivian battery. We used to work on a number of different battery types when we first got started because there wasn't enough Roadster business. Now we're extremely busy, lots of Roadsters coming in all the time, and Model S's at times when we can get to them and when we have an opening for them. The Roadsters we always have an opening for because there's so few service options for those.
Hmm.
But the Model S, there are other options, so those we draw the line at times. As far as Rivian or any of the other EV brands, we cannot take them in at this point. We're just we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the staff.
I know technology-wise, the batteries on these other electric vehicles, Rivian, Lucid is in the same boat. Most of them use the same lithium-ion technology that Tesla uses. I don't know if they're using the exact same 18650 battery cells, but it's a configuration that's very similar. Sometimes they'll use a lithium iron phosphate similar to the 4680 cells that are going into the rear-wheel drive Model Ys or into the 18650s that go into the Model 3s. Other than that, talking about the similarities in technology, there's not a lot we can intelligently speak to when it comes to the Rivian batteries.
Yeah, and each EV platform has a different design to a degree in terms of being able to access it. How do you get it open? What kind of battery management do they use? We've done a very good job of doing reverse engineering on all of the Tesla boards, but we really haven't been able to reverse engineer some of these other products. And, the manufacturers don't really share that information. You can't go to Rivian and say, we would like to buy some schematics for your battery pack, some of the BMB schematics, the battery management boards. Of course, that will change eventually, and there will be a lot of aftermarket activity as well.
Yeah, at this point, the biggest thing is the Tesla Roadster is pretty much the only vehicle outside of the Model S, which is starting to come off a warranty, that has a powertrain that's completely out of warranty. Every other electric vehicle maker and every other electric vehicle is so new that anything that needs to be done can be done with the manufacturer under their warranty. So there is no business opportunity for us yet.
Right.
I know that we've had some manufacturers come to us and talk about becoming authorized warranty centers or service centers, but nothing has been finalized as of yet.
Yeah. I think that's the end of this year. We've got one of those evolving at this point.
Mm-hmm.
YouTube Exploration says, happy little Roadster, LOL. Yeah, that is. It almost has a smile on the front of the car.
And that is very much a Bob Ross kind of type painting in our background as well.
Yeah. Is that the guy with the fro?
That's the guy with the fro. Yep. Happy little trees and a happy little Roadster.
He was so patient, too. You never hear him talk to a student and say, what are you doing? I told you not to do that. Come on, dummy, do it right.
Yeah.
TikTok, Smuggler. Welcome, Smuggler. How you doing? He sent us a gift. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Smuggler.
Much
Good to have you back
appreciated.
on today.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've been working on since the last Tesla Roadster podcast is a list of Tesla service centers that are accepting Roadsters. And the reason this is an important thing to start evolving is Tesla has regionalized Roadster service, meaning that not all service centers are able to take in a Roadster anymore. The most egregious example that we have is in North Carolina, where a customer used to driving 15 miles to a service center, took his Roadster there only to hear, well, you know what, we don't service them here anymore. You're going to have to go 240 miles north to Raleigh, North Carolina to get your Roadster serviced. So what we're doing now is developing a list of service centers so that the owners, the community is prepared where they can take their Roadsters. Here in state, for example, we have 4 different service centers. No, actually, there's more than that. I think there's one in Yuma and Tucson. Yeah, there was a remote working out of Tucson. But anyway, they have consolidated Roadster service in the state of Arizona now to one service center. Scottsdale and Tempe used to be the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important to know so that you don't, waste time driving to the wrong one only to find that you're going to be turned away. I had a great discussion with corporate this morning, but before I go there, there's a website or a Facebook site that we're posting this on currently. And let me see if I have an image that we can throw up there. Yeah, Jesse, if you can throw up Roadster SCs, and it's in the root folder under images. What I asked for here was for customers to tell us where they've been able to take their Roadsters for service. And we listed the ones that we were aware of that we've collected, and we also got 3 new ones overnight. So again, if you have any Roadster service centers that you're aware of, you can post it on this Facebook site. And the site, by the way, is Roadster. It's Tesla Roadster Owners Group on Facebook. And that way we can make that available. We'll eventually have these service center locations on our website so that you can reference it at any point in time. But in a conversation with corporate this morning, where we pointed out, it would be nice if the community knew where they could take their cars, they fully agreed. They're going to have to get some permission to publish this list, but it looks like it's coming, and we'll have a comprehensive list of service centers still able to service Roadsters.
That's going to be really helpful for the Roadster community and owners. The disadvantage of being hundreds of miles potentially away from a service center that can work on your car is, to me, more than offset by the advantage of knowing there's going to be somebody there at that service center that knows how to work on the car.
Right.
There's simply, I know that Tesla was simply losing the ability to work on the Roadster because there weren't enough people there that saw Roadsters on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm.
And so even the people that were being trained, if it's 3 or 4 months from the time you get training until you actually see a car, you lose most of that training.
Mm-hmm. And Tesla also, with their buyback program, uses those Roadsters as a training tool. I think it's a well understood process that anything you take apart is you're going to learn how it's put together. You're going to basically be able to work on it. I remember as a kid, one of my mother's biggest frustrations was I was constantly taking appliances apart because of my intense curiosity about mechanical and technical things.
Okay.
It didn't go that well back then, but, I was in trouble most of the time.
Well, it's along the lines of lining up all your bolts along the hood of the car that you're working on, right?
Right, yep. All right, so anyway, stay tuned. We will report more next week on any service centers that we don't have on this list. And eventually you'll be able to get this list on our website as well. And we'll post it on this Roadster Owner Facebook site for anyone that is interested.
Now, speaking of Facebook, William Mitchell has chimed in. First, good morning, William, and glad to have you on. He says, I'm sure you guys are aware of the new Tesla Collision Center that's opening in Scottsdale in October.
I was not. I'm embarrassed to say that. Thank you, William. I did not know they were opening there. Now, is this a Tesla-owned collision center or another subcontract arrangement? Because that's typically how they handled collision. They would certify existing body shops.
Right, for the body and collision work.
Yeah.
And I'm embarrassed to say I did not know that Scottsdale and Tesla were going to be opening a collision center as well. To me, I think they're getting a critical mass of especially the Model 3s, but also the Model Ys in. And it makes sense for them to be able to do that.
Sure. And of course, it's going to be a whole new skill set, based on the technicians that they typically have working on cars. This is a whole different field. So, yeah, that would be a great expansion for them to start to augment the existing network that they have of independents that are doing body work for them.
So I encourage you guys, keep the questions coming in. That really helps to drive the conversation here.
It does. So last week we reported that Copart has a Roadster for sale. And, To put this in perspective, years ago, we would find at least a half a dozen or more Roadsters every single year between IAA and Copart and Mannheim and some of these big auction houses. And we were able to buy parts cars.
Mhm.
And a parts car to us is a car that's so badly damaged that can't be put on the road and shouldn't be put on the road. We're talking about frame
Yes.
damage, folks. You can repair a frame, granted, but remember, you're going to be hurtling down the freeway with that thing at 80 miles an hour at some point in time, and you want to make sure it's totally safe. So, they, so with these cars, um, there are oftentimes collision damage cars, but the quantity has been reduced tremendously over the last few years. Now, whether that's because there are fewer Roadsters left, whether they're collectible and people are buying them themselves and they never get to auction, we're not quite sure why that is. But if you find a couple Roadsters per year these days at auctions, that's probably a lot. So this particular one is in Hawaii, and it was. Can we bring up that image, guys? I think it's in the images folder. No, I guess it isn't. All right, we had it up last week. I was issuing a warning with this car because the images indicate that there was water inside the cabin, all the way up to the top, basically. And there are some caveats to look out for when you're buying a flood-damaged electric vehicle. And we know this well because we bought 22 Model S's in 2017 during the hurricane seasons.
Mhm.
The questions that you need to consider or that you need to ask about is what was the extent of submersion? Now, you can't ask the auction houses, but in this particular case, with this Hawaiian Roadster that's out on Copart, there was a car dealer listed who could be contacted. And if anyone, by the way, has contacted them and would like to share, we'd like to get updated. We did not contact them ourselves. But the questions you're going to want to ask is, what was the extent of submersion? And this one is pretty obvious because you can see there's mud stains all the way to the top of the cabin. What kind of water? And this is critical. If it was truly fresh water or distilled water would be even better.
Right.
You're not going to get the conductivity in that fluid to create a lot of metal migration, electrolysis, and damage to the circuit boards. Typically, though, what you'll find is that during storm-related activity, you'll have brackish water. It'll be from storm surges. So you get ocean water blending in with the groundwater. And so if it has any salt content, that's definitely of concern. And then how long was it submerged? We bought one Tesla Model S that went through a flash flood. It lasted all of maybe 20 seconds. It spilled up over the hood, and it got into the fuse box on that Model S, and it sent some signals scurrying, which shut down the car. The insurance company immediately totaled it, not knowing the extent of damage, and we ended up buying it, and we got one that we were able to put on the road fairly easily.
Mm-hmm.
So how long was it submerged? Because a lot of damage can occur as it's extended. Was it a brief flash flood or was it days? And then also we recommend researching weather conditions around the loss date to corroborate a story on a car. This particular red 2011, I think it was, in Hawaii, we do not recommend purchasing because of the extent of damage. However, if you go on Copart now, there is another flood-damaged Roadster. And by the way, these come along every 5 years or so. I think we saw one in Florida over 5 years ago, and suddenly you got two of them back to back.
Just the oddest thing.
Yeah, and in completely different continents, This one is VIN number 506. Can you guys throw up an image for me? It's VIN 506 flood-damaged VIN. And I'm going to show you how you can figure out a VIN. What the auction houses don't like to do is reveal the VIN numbers for whatever reason. So if you look at the upper portion, you can, it's actually not that image, but that's fine. If you look at that upper right-hand portion there, it says VIN. The last 5 digits are starred out. If you go to another image, Jesse, which is VIN 506 flood damaged VIN JPEG. And what you'll see there is a place that you can find the VIN on these cars. because the auction houses typically take a certain set of pictures. It's right in the root directory, not under images. There you go. They took a picture of the VIN tag that's on the inside driver's door. And there you can see the full VIN. The last 3 digits are VIN 506. If you take a look at the pictures that are posted on Copart, it doesn't look like there is extensive water damage on the inside of the car. In fact, we couldn't even see any mud or anything like that. Now, you have to be careful here too. In the U.S., Copart and some of the other auction houses hire people to thoroughly detail these cars. And this one may have looked as bad as that one in Hawaii with mud on the inside.
Sure.
They didn't detail that one, but this one may have been detailed. So you really don't know the extent of the water damage in this Roadster. There is also, we found, by the way, VIN 506, our CRM, our database, has been collecting VIN numbers now for, 8 years or so. We were able to find the owner for VIN 506, and we've reached out to them to try to get the backstory. Why is this thing flood damaged? What happened to it? And asking all those earlier questions that we asked.
Sure, most definitely. And it's important to note as well, and this is one of the experiences we had when we bought all of those Model S's in 2017. Sometimes the title that you get for the vehicle is listed as a destruction title or a 4 parts only title.
Right.
And that has a tremendous impact on the repairability of the car as well. One of the water damaged cars we got in 2017, one of the least water damaged cars, in fact, was a red Model S, and it happened to have a destruction title instead of a salvage title.
Right.
And if you remember, we ended up selling that car to somebody in Mexico. It was one of the very first cars we repaired. We took it down for the inspection, and the state shut us down as soon as they saw the title. They're like, you're not even supposed to be driving it back to the shop. They're not supposed to be on the road.
Right. Yeah, so that is another consideration. And we were wondering why that Model S was so cheap, remember?
I do.
It was a $13,000 car, and I thought, wow,
I do.
should buy these all day long, right? So yeah, destruction versus salvage title. All right, so anyway, those of you that may be interested in any of these flood-damaged Roadsters on Copart, check with us because the owner of the blue one may contact us and we can give you more information. Facebook, William Mitchell is chiming back in, and the question that we posed earlier was, is Tesla moving into doing body work, body and paint, or are they still outsourcing? Because he had said that Tesla Scottsdale is going to open a collision center in Scottsdale in October. He says, yes, Tesla only now. Now, that's great news, actually, because I know Tesla has struggled with the outsourcing of their paint and body work.
Yeah, I think the ability for them to control the quality of the work that gets done on these cars is going to be important, and this is good news.
Mm-hmm. Another item that came in this week, there's a Roadster in France currently that is bricked. And this particular owner has more than one, went on vacation. You probably heard this story 100 times. Came back from vacation only to find that the power or the breaker tripped on a particular Roadster that was supposed to have been charged. And now it's dead. He can't even get in the car. The first part about that, and by the way, we're going to do a tutorial YouTube video within the next few weeks, how to get into a Tesla Roadster if the electronics have shut down. You can't use the door handle anymore. It's an electronic door handle. It's basically a little switch that gets triggered, and then the door will click and open for you. If the electronics shut down in a Roadster, that doesn't work anymore. And if your windows are rolled up and you have a hard top on the car or a soft top, it's going to be very difficult to get into. There is a key lock underneath on the bottom of the driver's side door, which you can use. And remember, the Roadsters are not 100% fob related yet. They have a metal portion key with a fob attached to it. You can actually use that to unlock that door and open your driver's side door. And you can do the same thing with your trunk, which most people are aware of because it's visible. to open your trunk if your latch doesn't work. So that's one of the ways to get into the car. What we did with this particular customer, since they're in France, normally we would send instructions how to prepare the car for transport, that we can do a battery recovery. We have partners around the world that are able to work on Roadsters. And what we did in this case was referred them to one of our partners that's close to where he lives, where his car is. And eventually, we're also going to put this information on our website so that people can see where the independent options are for Tesla Roadster service. So for any of you that have issues like this, and we can certainly help you find an independent Tesla Roadster repair resource in your area. The reason taking this to a Tesla Roadster service center is going to be a bit more expensive than an independent is. The solution right now in Europe is a battery replacement, not a recovery. Although in the US, we learned just a month or so ago that Tesla is going to start doing recoveries again using their Tesla Roadster recovery chargers.
Right. And in Toronto, we've been working with Tesla to attempt to do a level 1 recovery on a battery. Although I believe their recovery efforts have been unsuccessful so far.
Yeah. At this point, the latest information we received about that Roadster was a log file. And it looks like 2 of the sheets have blown sheet fuses. So a recovery isn't going to work in that case. In that case, you have to drop the battery pack. First of all, replace the fuses and then figure out whether it was PEM-related induced or whether there's something wrong in the pack.
Sure. And while that's a level 2 thing, that could potentially be good news for that owner because he's not necessarily talking about a resistive cell.
YouTube, Highlander Apparel asks, what fluke meter do you use? Do you use a Simpson 260B? Or you're dating yourself. I used to use a Simpson 260B. That's an old Darson voltmeter with, the needle that moves, and they were extremely rugged, very reliable. And the new flukes that we use now, the simplest ones are the 87s. Which is a DVM, a digital voltmeter.
Yeah, and the Simpson 260B, by the way, you can still get them today even.
Can you?
Yeah, they're more of an analog meter, but I was looking it up on Grainger this morning and
cool.
Find them for about $500 or so.
And they were the first attempt at plastic housings. You remember the old Bakelite stuff? It was very brittle and hard, and it got even harder as it aged. And I remember that was one of the Achilles heels of that Simpson meter was if you drop that, it most likely was going to chip out a corner or break the case. Whereas these new ones, like the 87, they're actually encapsulated in a yellow foam type, hard foam type material. So they're pretty impervious to being dropped. Instagram, Mark's Auto Parts. He says, hi from UK. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to have you on. Thank you.
So got a few pictures here we want to pop up, guys. And this one is the black wheels. It's in the black wheels folder. And I thought we could talk about something that's a popular upgrade for Tesla Roadsters. Now, remember, Tesla Roadsters have been around for 15 years. And it's very difficult to drive a car for 15 years and not get an occasional curb rash, or to take it to a tire shop and have them take a chip out of the side of where the lug nut goes into a wheel. So we find very few Roadster wheels pristine and perfect. There are some, but these are cars that aren't driven very much. What I wanted to show you is we have a black wheel here that was powder coated. It was originally silver with some stains on it and curb rash, all 4 of them actually. And this customer is having us do upgrades on this car. This will be a sterling silver Roadster with our performance upgrade brake package with red powder-coated calipers. Now, normally these get painted. And yeah, you can paint calipers, but the difficulty there is anybody using brake cleaner or even brake fluid can disrupt that paint. And it will take off some of that finish or remove the paint completely.
Sure.
So powder coating is the absolute best way to do any kind of colorization like this. And it's difficult to do because powder coating means you have to take the calipers off completely. If you're painting, you can mask around it. So there's some additional labor time there. Then you have to take off any of the non-ferrous parts, like seals, for example, which are rubber.
Mm-hmm.
And once you take them off, you have to replace them because you've compromised the integrity of that seal.
Sure.
So what we're doing with this is it will be red powder-coated brake calipers with the seals all replaced, and the customer decided to change the center caps and have those powder-coated as well with a red T, Tesla T on them. So we're kind of excited about seeing the finished product here, because I think this is going to be a cool-looking car when it's done.
That's a stunning picture of those already. And I know we were talking about that just this morning over at Gruber Motors, the ability to do the powder coating and how much more durable and rugged that's going to be for our customers. So we've that T as well. We have the ability to create some of those custom things ourselves, and that I guess that's what, just vinyl work on that?
Yeah, that's actually vinyl, and then it's clear coated, or at least coated so that it has some durability. And you're right, our service manager actually does this type of work.
Yes.
So it's basically in-house. The powder coating, by the way, there is a vendor that's about 500 feet from our shop that has been doing powder coating for over 20 years. And they are excellent. Everything that we've gotten from them has been first class. And yeah, so this is what you can make your Roadster wheels look like. All right, we have another image here, guys. And if we go to the bright Roadster folder, I popped this image back up. We actually took this a couple years ago. And it was one of those times when we happened to have some of the most brightly colored Tesla Roadsters in our service center. And the first one is called Brilliant Yellow. There weren't too many made in this color, and they usually stand out on the road when you see something like this. The next one is a one of. In the United States, there was only one Roadster that was painted in insane green. In Europe, they have about 6 of them, I believe. It was a more popular color there. It was a original Lotus color. And so what we're showing here is the only insane green in the United States. It came to us with a battery problem. It's VIN number 100. It was the last of the signature 100 Roadsters. And the customer is actually selling this car. It's out on our Gruber Motors Roadsters for Sale website. And for the right price, this customer is willing to part with this one-of car. Now, the green Roadster, the third one in, is lightning green. And this one is generally attributed as being the brightest green Roadster color. But here you can see that's really not the case when we stacked it next to the insane green. And you can see how much more vibrant that insane green is than the lightning green. And by the way, lightning green, I think there were 33 of them painted in that color. They only were painted in that color in 2011 in the United States. And it was actually originally a Subaru color. And then the fourth one is one of my favorite colors. This is the electric blue. So we happen to have 4 really brightly colored Roadsters that we were able to stack next to each other. And this one is always a popular picture when we display it.
You know, I happened to be going down the freeway yesterday during the Independence Day holiday. I didn't see a Roadster, but what I saw was a car almost that color of insane green. It was, I would like to call it neon yellow, is probably an accurate description. It was a sports car. It was an electric car. Unfortunately, I was not able to speed up fast enough, even in my EV Volvo, to catch up to it. He was moving.
He was booking, yeah, which is usually what hypercars do. Interesting though, but yeah,
But they're beautiful cars and the stunning colors. I really hope that Tesla does come out with some of these colors for options for their Model Y and Model S and Model 3s.
I'm sure there are customers that would like bright colors like this on their sedans. But at this point, if you look at the color lineup with the later model Teslas, there's really nothing like this Roadster bright color that's available yet. There are
nothing at all.
Yeah, there are people that are wrapping their cars currently in some pretty exciting colors. In fact, Ellie in Space is going to be with us tomorrow, and she just got her Model 3. It is wrapped, and it is a almost not a turquoise, kind of a teal color. It's one of those colors, one of those wraps where it changes depending on the light.
Oh,
it's
okay.
kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what color it is because it'll change on you. But I'm sure she'll tell us about her car and what motivated her to change the color.
Oh, by all means. On TikTok, Bash A has joined us this morning. He says about the powder coat painting, he says, plus powder coat is way more durable. Couldn't agree with you more on that one.
It is indeed, yes. And then YouTube, John Lawson Lidstrom is joining us from Seattle. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome, and glad to have you here.
So moving along here, stock, Tesla stock. I think this morning it was like 279. Did you guys see it at that level?
I've been seeing it hover between 275 and as high as 283.
I think Richard said it was 279 yesterday.
Correct. As of 1:36 p.m. Eastern Time, it is 280.76 cents.
Okay, so it's actually cracked 280 again then. I found an interesting comment that was made here by by an investor, and he said that has anyone noticed about all the analysts totally trouncing Tesla stock, claiming it's overvalued? It didn't make sense. And he was talking about last Tuesday's meteoric rise. He says that, let me get the rest of this here so I can get past all of this verbiage here. He feels that what's happening is, with it declining a bit, and that was last week, is people are going to take profits. It's quite normal. You watch a stock run up, a bit of fear sets in, and will it remain there? And if you have a healthy amount of margin and profit in that stock, it's not abnormal for people to take profits and pull out of it again. So that's why these things are sometimes volatile. But in a case like a Tesla run-up like this, the other thing that contributes is short sellers bailing as fast as they can. And the way that they bail is they have to buy the stock in order to make the difference, right? So that is going to increase, of course, the stock because there's more demand for it.
Right, because for those who aren't familiar with investing as much, a short sale, very simply put, I'm going to say, Pete, I will sell you my Tesla stock in a week, and and I'm going to sell it to you for $300. Now, I'm betting that stock is going to go down in a week. So I'm going to say things that might bash Tesla, hoping that I can buy the stock for less than $300. At some point in the next week, if I see that stock is going to skyrocket, or if it's going up rapidly, I might either try to cut my losses or just say, oh my gosh, it's getting too high, it's going too quick. So I'm going to go out there and buy stock in order to fulfill that short sale. I sold what I didn't have, and that's why it's called a short sale.
Yeah, you sold what you didn't have, exactly. You had to make up the difference.
Yeah, so now I have to make up the difference.
And of course, conversely, you would have made money if it had gone down, because you would have bought it cheaper.
Exactly. I would have sold it today for $300, and if it went down to $250, I'd have made $50 a share when I had to go buy it.
So so here's his opinion though about the analysts, and he apparently didn't like analysts, and but he says, here's the thing: you can apply this critique to every level of market analysis. Everything is guessing, conjecture, and hindsight.
He makes a great point there. Tesla recently announced their deliveries for this last quarter, and they beat their delivery estimates by almost 20,000 cars. The estimates on the street were about 445 to 450,000, and they said that they actually delivered close to 465,000. I think it was 466 and some. So now the analysts, the Tesla bashers, have said, well, yeah, but they had all these sales, and it was only the sales that moved the cars, and now you're going to have to go look at the profits, because I'll bet the profits are going to be way down. It's them trying to spin good news into something negative so that the stock doesn't go up.
Mm-hmm.
Yet this is a fundamental thing for the average Joe investor.
Plus, they don't like being wrong.
Oh yeah, they totally don't like being wrong.
They have some angry people when they're wrong. Yeah.
The average Joe investor says, oh, you know what? This company's doing really well. They just set a sales record. I think I'm going to buy their stock. And so the stock goes up.
Yeah. You know, Wedbush is one of the investment analysts that's been very bullish on Tesla, and they have a $300 price target right now on the shares. But anyway, his comment was that he felt that Elon was a great poker player, and that he began to reduce the cost of his car since the first of this year. And I was surprised that there were 6 downward price adjustments since the first of the year. And of course, that created more demand, and that's partly responsible for these kinds of production figures.
I think it is too. You know, and Tesla was smart about this. They learned very quickly that if they take and drop the price of their Model Y by $2,000 or $3,000, I think it was at the time. I think it was running about 61,000, and all they needed to do is get it below 60,000. Then that $7,500 federal tax incentive would kick in.
Mm-hmm.
So to them, they're dropping their price by 2,000. To the consumer, the price has gone down by
10,000. Yeah, exactly.
And because the consumer is suddenly able to get the federal rebate on their car. To me, that's just a smart move by a company that's trying to move their cars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Elon has famously said he wants to compete against the Fords of the world, not against the supercars.
Right. So YouTube, Paraglider76 says, hi all, about colors. I love the Tarocco Rosso too. Now that's got red in it because I think that's what Rosso is in Italian.
Yeah, it looks like a blood orange type of color. I actually had to pull it up because I wasn't totally sure what it was. And that's a beautiful color.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we ran into actually a few weeks ago was someone has a Tesla Roadster for sale. And there are pictures of it. It's out on our listing site. And with the trunk lid open, you can see the PEM, and the PEM says Roadster Sport on it. And so the car was listed as a Roadster Sport. However, there were some other elements in a Sport Roadster that were missing on this particular car. And those are, by the way, in the seats. If you have a Tesla Roadster Sport, the S is going to be a different color than the rest of the letters. And it's usually a bright, vibrant color, sometimes the color of the car, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The second place that you'll find an indication that it is a Sport Roadster is in the door sills. Instead of saying Tesla Roadster, it will say Sport Roadster. Then finally, the back, the PEM. You have a decal that's placed on top of the PEM that will either say Tesla Roadster or Sport Roadster. And the final indication that you have a Sport Roadster is going to be the lettering on the back of the car. They all say Tesla on the back, but on a Sport Roadster, just to the right, below the Tesla letters, you'll see script writing that says Sport Roadster.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other items were missing other than the PEM decal. This particular car was then, the owner went back to Tesla and said, I need to know for sure whether this is a Sport Roadster or not. And they said, yes, it definitely is. And so we left that posting up. And then one of our customers pointed out, well, there's a simpler way. It's in the VIN. And if you guys can throw up the VIN chart. This, by the way, is available for those of you that would like to see it on our website under newsletters. And there's a newsletter called VIN Decoder. The 8th digit in a Tesla Roadster VIN, it will tell you whether it is a base version Roadster or if it was a sport version Roadster. If it's a 1, it's base. If it's 3, it's going to be sport. Now, why would this PEM have had a sport badge on it then? Well, the simple answer to that is, as Tesla began to change PEMs and swap PEMs, we don't know whether they ran out of decals or whether it just wasn't important at the time. They found the most convenient PEM at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, some PEMs that some Roadsters we've received that have had the PEM swapped out didn't even have that decal on the PEM. It was left blank. So I guess the bottom line is you can't really go by the PEM cover to determine whether you have a Roadster PEM. The safest place to do that, it appears, is in the VIN, and that VIN decoder that we've popped up there will tell you all of the rest of the stuff that goes along with decoding a Roadster.
Now, other than the motor, which is what the 8th position on the VIN does for, tells that it's the sport motor, which is the zippier, faster motor, and is the key to a Tesla Sport. Are there other things in the car other than badging that would differentiate the sport version of a Tesla Roadster from a non-sport version?
Well, yes, the drive motor that you mentioned. Legend has it that Tesla began to run out of drive motors at one point, and you'll find a lot of base Roadsters, or we find a lot of base Roadsters because we take the PEMs out and the batteries out. They have an S drawn on it, and it's usually with a paint, like a brush stroke. That would indicate that this was a sport motor. There's a second indication or a second deviation that was done. And by the way, back in the day, I think a sport upgrade for a Roadster was around $14,000.
Wow.
So it was something that, customers had to pay for. But there's also a firmware tweak that is done for the Sport Roadster. And from 0 to 30 miles, it overdrives or drives the IGBTs a bit heavier than a standard base Roadster.
Okay, so there is some actual things going on in the firmware as well as in the motor that help to differentiate the sport versus non-sport version of the Roadster.
That is correct. From a collecting standpoint, though, and this is where this is becoming more important, having all of those other check boxes checked is going to be very important because just because you have a PEM that says sport isn't going to, command the type of values that a real badged sport Roadster would provide.
Oh, by all means. And in fact, for collectability reasons, it would be as important to leave the non-sport Roadster as a non-sport Roadster as it would for a sport Roadster to be left as a sport Roadster. So there will be those people that say, well, I can convert your Roadster from a standard to a sport because it's nothing more than a software tweak. Well, yes and no. You might actually be harming the value of your car if you try to do that.
You can, there's the issue of originality as cars become collectible. Take the 60s muscle cars, for example. By the 80s, there were infinitely better technologies available for those cars. You take a 68 Dodge Charger with a 440, stock engine. Well, you had crate engines by that time that you could put in those cars. You had a 528 Hemi that you could put in there. And of course, the car performed much better than the original 440 stock engine.
Sure.
The difficulty was you were affecting its sellability and its collectible value. In fact, in the world of car collecting, originality is absolutely vital. And if you turn a car into a clone car that was collectible at the beginning, you've lost a lot of value. So what we recommend, we have certain upgrades to the Roadsters. For example, the 12-volt battery relocation into the trunk. Well, you spend $500 once more, and then you never have to get Tesla or anyone else to dig into the front fender and, spend $500 to get that battery replaced. And you have to do that every couple, 3 years. We do not recommend doing that to a collectible pedigreed Roadster. And by that, I mean early VINs, Signature 100 cars or 250 in Europe, extremely low mileage cars that aren't going to be driven. They're going to be Picasso's on the wall somewhere, Originality is absolutely essential. In fact, in some of these car events, there were people, judges, that would walk around to look at the originality of certain types of cars, like the 60s muscle cars, hypercars, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, whatever. And what they would look for is imperfections. You can do a much better job of painting a roll bar, for example, or like in fact, Mopar, there were idler arms that had paint drips on them because back in the day in the Hamtramck facility where they were building these cars, they used rattle can black to paint these, and then it would typically drip.
Okay.
So in order to maintain its collectability, you had to replicate the drips. I remember with my Ferrari, I had a little fender bender, a quarter panel issue, and I asked the body shop, will you be able to make it look original and all that? He says, the biggest difficulty is not making it, fixing it, and then making it look perfect. It's replicating the slight orange peel that's on Ferraris.
Right.
So anyway, that's the story on collectible cars and the story on sport roadsters versus non-sport roadsters.
That reminds me, because when we talk about the collectible cars, that's why the barn finds become so incredibly valuable and potentially important, is because these are cars that will typically have been sitting for years or decades in some sort of facility, or literally a barn a lot of times, collecting dust and nothing and not much else.
Right.
Maybe old rat's nests. But maybe you want to tell us a little more about the barn find roadsters and what we have.
Yeah, I was going to try to get updated this morning because it's July 5th is when the cars are supposed to leave the dock in China. And I was not able to get a hold of anyone this morning, but I'm going to check, and by next Wednesday, we'll have an update for you as to how the cars are doing, whether they're on the boat and headed to the United States, to the Long Beach port.
I am crossing my fingers a little bit and hoping that by reaching out at the end of our day today, because by then it will be morning in China, that you might have a chance to actually talk to the owner of these barn find roadsters, and maybe we get lucky and have an update for tomorrow even.
TikTok, Bash A says, if I could move to Arizona, could I work for you guys? I love Teslas. They're the future. We accept applications all the time. If you want to send your resume to ev@gruber.com, we're always looking for talented people to add to our staff, and we do training. We can't find any kind of schools that are able to crank out competent people yet. So a lot of our skill evolution is on-the-job training and shadowing and learning, the Teslas from the ground up.
I think what we have found with our mechanics and our workers, we've gotten from both ends of the spectrum. The engineers, electrical engineers that come in and are able to work on the PEMs and do the component level, and they've learned a lot more about the mechanical side of the business as time has gone on. We've had our mechanics that have come in, the wrenchers, and they've become much more adept at dealing at a fairly simple level with a lot of the electronic stuff. They're able to do some of the things like the battery pulls and stuff like that.
Sure. And we have two different types of openings. One is for engineering lab type people, engineering technicians, electrical engineers. These are the people that work on the electronics in the modules, in the power electronics module, the inverters. And the skills there that we're looking for is years of experience, surface mount soldering, problem resolution using all the advanced test equipment from oscilloscopes to, DVMs and function generators. So we have two types of positions, and oftentimes there's cross-pollination. We train,
Yeah. Definitely. And at some point, I know that it would be great if we could get another software technician in, somebody who can
Yep.
add software and Linux skills into that technical mix. We've had, that's the one that's been the hardest to find somebody for.
Actually, I need to check with Victor. Someone interviewed last week, and I think we were supposed to make an offer. So that may be solved. We've got some more firmware people potentially coming
Be
in.
fantastic.
Yeah. If you guys can bring up a picture, this one is in the pinhole picture or pinhole folder. So we ran into a real strange issue last week, and as soon as the first picture comes up,
Which one? 0, 2, 5? They're kind of out of order.
oh, they are out of order. Well, the one that you're going to want is called...
Looks like it's 0. There's the one that you want first.
Yeah, they're in alphabetical order, Jess. So 0, and then 2, 5, 6, and 7. So what we're going to show here is our electronics lab, and there's a 1.5 Roadster, which is the early generation VIN up to VIN 500 power electronics module on the bench. And the cover has been removed from this. And typically what we find, since there's such a good seal on these power electronic modules, which sit in the trunk of a car and have sensitive electronics inside them, is a pristine environment inside. It's almost surgically clean, even after 15 years like this one. This is a 2008. And if we go to the next image, image number 2, we got quite a surprise here. There's a circuit board that we're showing there, which is the PEC board. And you can see all that dust, dirt, and debris that's on that board. They looked around the surface of the lid to see if there was any kind of compromise there. Everything looked rock solid. Then a bit more sleuthing, and if we can go to the next image, Jesse.
And I've seen the inside of these PEMs. Seeing a board like that, I would think that there was some sort of a catastrophic failure that had occurred.
Yeah.
Where, an IGBT had blown or something like that.
And there was nothing in the proximity there that was electronic that would have blown.
Right.
Not, it was near a capacitor or anything, and no hole in the top of the lid or anything. But if you notice carefully there, in the middle upper portion, there's a tiny hole there where that weld ends. And we've got a close-up in the next image. Let's take a look at that.
So that one little tiny hole was responsible for all that dirt.
And we'll show you in a moment here how the dirt, that much dirt, was able to get through that tiny little hole. And then in the last image, you'll see why. That portion of the power electronics module is actually an aluminum plenum that directs airflow from this 12-volt fan, a SPAL fan, to the right across the transistor heat sinks, cooling the PEM. And so there was positive air pressure inside that plenum the entire time, for 15 years actually.
Yeah.
And some of that air continuously migrated through that hole and blew on that circuit board.
And that air obviously was somewhat or completely unfiltered then, correct?
Totally unfiltered, yeah. That's one of the Achilles heels of a Tesla Roadster is the PEM cooling portion of a Roadster was really an afterthought. Martin Eberhard told us this years ago. He said the original design of the Roadster was to use the side scoops to provide cooling for the power electronics module, but they never quite finished that design because in 2008, they had to get cars into the hands of owners. There was no more time left for, fancy engineering and, final resolutions like this. So what the PEM has is a weakness in that the amount of dust that is continuously sucked in by these fans blowing across those transistors eventually coats those heat sinks with enough of a blanket of dust to where it can no longer function as efficiently to get rid of the transistor heat. And that's why it is recommended that every year you get a Tesla Roadster preventive maintenance done. In fact, in the firmware, it will actually, there's a timer running in there, and every year it will pop up and say, maintenance required, maintenance required.
And this is one of the pieces of maintenance that they do when the maintenance is required. Then.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So that was a first. We have never seen a PEM with anything like that, and so very unusual. Now, speaking about, we have a couple of questions there.
Yeah, on Instagram, Habibullah Khan Official says, hi from Pakistan. So good evening to you, and we're so glad that you joined us. It's got to be about 9 o'clock in the evening in Pakistan right now. And then on TikTok, Bash A responded to our answer to his question. He says, thank you.
So moving along here, this is the time of year in various parts of the United States when the early generation Roadsters really have a difficult time staying cool enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to happen in the Northeast, Northwest, or, in the Four Seasons country, because if your temperatures are 100 or below, the Roadsters will be quite fine with that. But here in Arizona, we've been running, 114-degree days recently?
Yeah, 114 to 116.
And we have a Roadster up in Las Vegas, Nevada. Same problem. It's an early VIN number 13, actually. And they suffer. What happens is the BMB boards and the ESS packs complain about the excessive heat, and they will actually disallow a charge until it reaches a certain temperature. Now, there's some things that you can do, of course. The cooling system in a or in a Roadster is in the 1.5 series is a 12-volt DC brush motor. And there are two things that are weaknesses in that type of motor. One is the brushes. Now, remember, DC motor brushes are like two pencil erasers on either side of a commutator that's constantly spinning, and you're wearing those carbon brushes down as it's turning. So eventually you end up with less material and less spring force on that commutator. The end result is you get less rotational force, and your gallons per minute that are being pumped through the cooling system are beginning to lessen and decline. The second thing that happens in this type of motor is it has bearings. And anybody that that is in the mechanical world understands that bearings are something that wears out with time. They get gummed up, so it has drag. They begin to lose their diameter, or they widen, so you get wobble. And again, it affects the amount of fluid that your, in this case, a pump can move through whatever it's trying to cool. So we recommend with 1.5 Roadsters that every 5 years that DC brush motor pump is replaced. And where it becomes most noticeable is in the extremely hot periods of the year when this pump is trying to cool that battery pack and it's not doing a very good job anymore. Now, the downside is I have Tesla VIN number 5 at home, which suffers from this, by the way. And without some external cooling or putting it into a controlled environment, my garage gets 120 easily during the middle of summer. So what happens is the ESS pack will not allow a charge. And at the same time, the pump is running all the time to try to cool it, so it's draining the battery. This is where Roadsters can get bricked, because you get down into the 10, 20-mile range. It doesn't take long to go from there to a bricked state unless you're able to charge. So one of the things that we recommend is when you're charging your Roadster, and it doesn't matter where the Roadster is, open that rear trunk cover to allow more air to circulate. That helps. Make sure that your pump gets replaced every 5 years. For those of you that want to change your own pump, which some people do, there's a pretty good write-up that Tom Saxton actually created over 10 years ago or so. And it is out there. You can Google this, and it's called Tesla Roadster Coolant Pump Failure. It was written actually in 2016. And he talks about how to change the pump, which is on the passenger side rear quarter panel or inside the quarter panel. And then he talks about how to burp the car afterwards. It's like a baby. When you affect the cooling cycle, you have to get rid of some air that was introduced. And what he recommends is jacking up the right side of the car, at least a foot or so that the coolant tank that's in the back of the battery pack is higher than the rest of the car. And then just let it run, and you can accelerate how much it's running by plugging in the yellow charge cable and doing a charge while it's bleeding off this air. And it takes about 24 hours or so. And once the frothing is done, then you know that you've gotten all the air out of your Tesla Roadster cooling system. The the type of coolant that you should use to top it off is Sierra propylene glycol antifreeze. And I have a part number here for you. It's SEP003. It's available on Amazon or other third parties. And he says it's a crazy high price. But then he gives us some other prices, $16.99 and $12.99. Now, this is 2016. I think inflation is carved into that pricing. So there you have it, how you can assist your Roadster. Now, I talked to Tesla Corporate this morning, and I said, guys, I've got this customer up in Vegas right now who is considering pulling the service plug on his battery pack, so he doesn't have to deal with needing to charge it all the time, removing all of the drain, in other words, on the battery pack. I asked them, I said, what do you think of that? I have my own reservations about that. And anyway, they're going to check further into that. But he recommends the same thing that I do with Tesla number 5. I've got a cooling fan on top of the ESS battery pack because I don't environmentally control my garage. And I've been doing that about a week now, and it's able to charge with that continuous airflow, pushing air down the front and the back of the ESS pack, which is essentially what it does is when you lay a fan on top of the ESS pack. We're not sure yet whether pulling a service plug would be risky or not, and we'll report in the next Wednesday session. But anyway, corporate says, these 1.5 Roadsters, we knew about those problems early on, and there wasn't much we could do. It turns out that most of the early Roadster buyers were pretty well heeled, and they typically had environmental control in their garages, or car collectors, for example.
Sure.
Guys like me don't have environmental control in my 2-car garage, so the fan works great. What I ended up doing was I used one of the critical power UPS fans, which we're swimming in. We have plenty of those.
Yeah.
One of those squirrel cage fans, and I set that on top of the pack with a couple pieces of wood so it doesn't scratch anything, and it just sits there and cools it constantly.
Well, you can get a squirrel cage fan at your local auto store or Walmart, and they move a lot of air, and they can be $60 or $70. Nowadays, a basic mini split AC system that could cool a typical 2-car garage, about $2,000 installed. And so not a huge expense, but more than what a lot of people would want to be able to pay just to keep their car housed. Sure. But that tells me that these BMB boards are starting to get sensitive at temperatures probably, around 125 to 130 degrees.
Well, my VIN number 5 starts getting into difficulty at about 105 or so.
Okay.
And now when it's 115 to 120 in that garage, there's no way that it would charge.
Right, because when the external temperature is 115 outside, your best case is that your garage is sitting at about 105 to 110.
Sure.
And it probably gets even hotter in the afternoon if you have an east-west facing house.
Well, there's another thing that compounds it too. If you're able to start successfully charging in your garage, that's going to heat up the garage.
Right.
So that takes it even higher. Now, one of the things that corporate Tesla said this morning, and I was talking to an old timer that was there for well over a decade in the early days of Roadster. He says, these Roadsters, especially the early ones, if it's 115 out, remember, you need to take short trips. If you do any long trips, you're going to run into power limiting. It's going to overheat. It's not going to be happy. And the fundamental reason is you're driving over black, hot asphalt. And there's a certain amount of radiant heat that comes off of that that gets inside your Roadster, especially with that cooling fan sucking air from the bottom up into the PEM.
Yeah, I was thinking at that point exactly. That fan is pulling air that's probably 3 or 4 inches off the ground. And in the summertime in Phoenix, the typical temperature of asphalt is about 165 degrees.
That's why you can fry an egg on our
Yes,
asphalt or
that's exactly
or
right.
on concrete, right? And bake cookies on your dash.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I've heard that cookies baked on your dash are very good, and they make the car smell wonderful.
Right? So one final thing is, for those of you that are do-it-yourselfers, and by the way, we encourage that. Get involved in your car, learn about your car, and it's not that hard to perform some of these fixes and these replacements. But don't try to save a buck. We experimented with a number of different 12-volt DC cooling fans for the 1.5 Roadsters until we settled on a brand and a type that actually worked long-term and had the maximum GPM. It won't be the cheapest thing, but if you go on our e-store, you can buy that on our e-store, and it's been a couple of 3 years of trial and error to select this particular type. There's a lot of cheap knockoffs out there that you could buy, Amazon, eBay, wherever you go, but your Roadster may not like it. So spend a little bit more and get the right thing, and you can benefit from our trial and error experimentations.
By all means. Oh, and by the way, on the coolant itself, I'm looking at prices. Walmart has the Peak SAP003 coolant, which would be Roadster compatible, for about $33.
Okay.
And so that's around the price that I'm seeing for a gallon of coolant, is in that low 30s. Oh, you can absolutely go to a premium auto store and spend $150 and get the same gallon if you really want to.
But what we're saying here is that the price of that has actually doubled in the last 7 years.
Yes.
But we don't have any inflation, right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Exactly.
All right. Well, let's see. Do we have any final questions? Instagram, Don't Blick 101. He says, sorry, I won't use that.
Not sure if that was referring to the coolant or what that was referring to. So on Instagram, don't blink if you want to let us know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I've run out of talking points here. We're going on an hour and 12 minutes.
I think the main talking point is that, and I want to keep telling our audience, you're here next Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So tomorrow we see Ellie in space.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be 10 o'clock East, Pacific time. Looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a really, really fun talk. Next Tuesday, of course, our 10 a.m. And then Wednesday, you'll be here. After that, you're going to be in Europe for a couple of weeks.
Actually, Thursday next week is when we fly out. I got the information from my wife. And I will try to do some TikToks and, stay tuned into our audience a bit. But in the meantime, it's going to be Mark. We're going to have Victor, our service manager. We have, who else is, Richard's going to be joining. There you go.
I've forced Richard to come in and sit with me on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we'll try to have Victor or somebody in on Wednesdays to co-host along with me. Looking forward to it. Should be a lot of fun.
Victor, I'm sorry. Richard, what are you thinking? He's going to put on his sunglasses before the camera.
You gave it away. I was pausing for dramatic effect, Pete.
Give away the secrets.
I was going to say, no force needed, Mark. I'm excited to co-host again.
And by the way, Richard, he was my original co-host, or one of the early ones at least.
Yes.
I know we've had a few. So, I think you'll enjoy. And this Friday, we've got our Gruber Power Services podcast, which is where we talk all things critical power and data center related. Sundays, for those of you that want to join us, we've got an impromptu 10 a.m. in the morning AI podcast. And we learn new stuff every week, and it's more of a discussion and collaborative, interactive type style. And then next week, Tuesdays is the EV podcast, Wednesday Roadster, Thursday EV. And do we have a guest lined up for next week? Not yet? Okay, there may be one.
We're still working on that.
Okay.
Because you'll be gone, so we're still planning some other guests that Mark and Richard can handle.
Okay. Again, we'll have a lot more information for you next Wednesday as we work with Tesla Corporate on a couple of things. One is, where are the service centers that are able to take in Tesla Roadsters, and what is their final advice on overheating Roadsters this time of year?
by all means. We should have an update by next Wednesday as well on the China barn find Roadsters. Looking forward to hearing and having an update on that. Couple last things. Don't Blink 101 on Instagram. It said it's a Sierra coolant. He says, I'm not going to use that particular brand of coolant. Personally, I'm not familiar with the brand, so I can't say one way or the other. He does say, though, if you guys ever come out to California, let me know. Would like to meet up.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you.
We'll definitely do that.
All right. Well,
We'll see everybody tomorrow.
yeah. And thank you for joining us.
Take care, guys.